Hello everyone, so welcome back, and for this one let's talk about lighting. Now, it might seem a little weird to jump to lighting instead of doing like a room design that will actually light, but I figure it's important that way because we gone over how to get to stuff. So if you're building your stuff and you want to know how to do lighting, there's an interior method and an exterior method. I figure, well, we got access to both. We'll talk about exterior lighting, we'll add a roof to this place, and then we'll do some interior lighting. And then at the end, we'll put together a quick little flickering light that you'll be able to change the color of. So to get started, let's talk about the exterior lights. There's two main ones that you will use in an exterior world. This is the directional light and the skylight. You can find these under your light tab over in your place actors. Remember, if you don't have your layout like this and you can't find this, you can either go to window and hit this place actors to get this, or you can go down to load layout and just hit that UE4 Classic layout. Now, it might seem a little bit squished, but there's something you can do under your debug folder. So tools, debug, and the widget reflector. You can alter the scale of things if you need to. I had to do this because I'm on a laptop right now, so I wanted to make sure everything was kind of visible. So if it seems a little stretched or skewed, that's why. But if yours needs a little bit more room, you can right there. So for our directional light, it's right here. This is what mimics the sun. So you see it's up at that angle. That little arrow shows the direction it's shining, and then that's why that shadow is right there. And wherever you rotate this, it will update the light to be going in that direction. What's cool about their sky sphere is it'll kind of mimic a sundown type thing, and it updates the colors and everything. It's really cool. But of course, if you want more fine-tuned control over the intensity and the color, you can set the color over here in your details panel. You can just pick the color that you want. You can pick how bright you want it to be. When you first drag out one, so let's say you didn't have one in your level and you drug one out, whatever. Its default is 10. 3 is the startup default. But when you drag a new one out, it defaults to 10. A source angle is just I'm not really sure, something about where the actual sun sits. You can hover over any one of these things to get a little bit more info about. I'm mainly going to be talking about the ones I actually use, because anything else I don't really know too much about. But there's a lot of settings that they have access here, but you don't really use them too terribly much. Here, this use temperature, this can affect like how hot or cold the lighting or warm or cold the lighting feels. So let's say it's like a summer environment. Bump this temperature down. You're in the desert. You're in the tropics. You're, I don't know, New England, etc., etc. And you can bump this up as high as you want, as low as you want. Generally, I leave it at default, and then just affect the color this way. Gives a little bit more control, plus you can have like greens and all that jazz. The volumetric scattering will give you kind of like a bloom effect if you've got volumetric fog in the level, which we currently do, I believe. Let me just take a look. No, it's not volumetric. But we'll talk about that in a second, because that's another important piece of lighting that gets overlooked sometimes. Oh yeah, it's over here now. So yeah, there's a few other things. So the light shafts is also something you can... Basically, this is whenever you're looking up at the sun. You can really tell once you've got like trees and volumetric fog and all that jazz. This will just create little light shaft occlusion, so it'll cut out light to make it look like there's light shafts and bloom in those shafts, etc., etc. Pretty much anything else I don't usually mess with, but that should get you started on some exterior stuff. Now, coupled with the directional light is a skylight. So just to show you what this does, if I get rid of this, you'll see how our shadows are really harsh. Like, it's just a straight up, like, nothing. What the skylight does is it adds some bounce lighting. So the sunlight comes in, bounces off this, and kind of reflects up and helps fill in these shadows. It also has an intensity scale, so you can make it to where it gets more bounces and brightens up your shadows even more. Or if you want something more dark, mysterious. So you can affect the intensity, just kind of do that. And it also has a color also, so you can affect the color of your shadows. And it'll kind of give everything else a nice little afterglow of that color, which is cool. One thing to keep in mind is, let's say I have my Skylight intensity bumped way up, and then I go and affect my directional light and bump it way down. Now, they are somewhat linked, but it doesn't actually update in real time. You have to go back to your Skylight, and if I hit this real-time capture and disable it, or reset, so if I set this just back to 5 again, 4, and then back to 5, you see it's a lot darker than it was just a second ago. So if I set this up here, and then 4, 5, see how bright it is now? So you'll want to set your directional light first, and then affect your Skylight, because this one will not update according to the other. So let's set this, I'm going to set it to about 2, and then I'll go to my Skylight. If you don't want to reset the number and then set it back, you can just enable this real-time capture, and then turn it right back off, and it'll automatically refresh. Now the effects world and cast shadow, effects world just means it affects the world that it resides in, and cast shadow, I don't think that really does anything for the Skylight itself, but on the directional light it does exactly what it says. And for the Skylight, that's pretty much it also. Now sometimes if you start in an empty world and you don't have a post-processing, you'll see how this is kind of brightening up automatically. But if I look down, it kind of dims out. It's hard to tell because that Skylight's so bright. Where's my Skylight? Let me bump that back down and give you a real demonstration. Oh, up higher. Oh, wait. Oh, I moved it. I'll bump that back to 1. So you'll notice if I'm right up on this dark spot that it kind of brightens up, but if I look back over here in the sun, it kind of dims the shadows again. That is the auto exposure settings. So if you're having that annoying, like you're trying to work on something and then it suddenly gets real bright and you're like, I don't like that, I don't want that. What you could do is you could just grab this post-processing settings in your volumes tab. You can scroll down to it, or up at the top you could just search post, and then right here drag one of them out, and then under the exposure settings, the way it's usually fixed is this min EV and max EV. We'll just enable both of those and hit 0, 0 on that, and nothing happens. You might wonder why, but that's because this post-process volume by default only affects what's inside of it. So if I go in it, now you see we're getting rid of that bloom or that grow effect of the light. If I get out of it, you'll see it picks back up. Now you don't want to have to scale this to your entire level if it's something you want applied to your entire level, but they do have an option. So in your details panel, if you type in INF, which is for infinite extent, and then just click that, now everything is applied the same, whether you're inside that volume or not. So just a handy way of being able to affect color grading for an entire level, to affect the harshness of shadows, what have you. So that is the basics of the lighting. Now another effective thing to help set the atmosphere of something is your exponential height fog. And this is essentially, where is it? There it is. It's that kind of distance fog effect. So right now it's set to this, but if I bump it, let me just bump it up to 2 to really sell the point. Where am I? Where did you take me? There we go. So you can kind of see that that foggy background. You bump it up way high if you want like a Silent Hill style game. Oh, I guess it only goes to 10. I tried to pump 15. Yeah, it only goes to 10. But yeah, you can do that. The height fall off is how far away from that actual exponential height token that it decides to stop. So it's related to that thing's world position. Why is it way down there? I guess so they can have just it set the way they want. 0, if you set it to 0, it goes all the way. It doesn't stop. And 2, it gives you kind of a... Let me bring it up. So you can see now we're affected, and then you can rise over above it, essentially. The max opacity, so if I bump this up and let it go on, see how off in the distance you can't see anything. But if I bump this down to like 0.8, now I can see the clouds. It's got more of a visible effect. Basically, this just makes it a wall of dense fog, and then you can kind of, like if you wanted it to be a little bit distant, but still have visibility off in the distance, you can affect that through the opacity. Start distance is basically how far away from the camera it is that it will start. So, let's say you want it to be the player is completely enveloped in fog as you're running around. Then you don't want it to have any start distance. You want it to just start immediately. But if you're, let's say, it's one of those games where you have a little bit of visibility around the player to make sure they find key items or anything that they walk up on, then you can affect that start distance, and as they move into stuff, let's say they have like a light on them that dispels the fog a little bit, then that can help with that. This cutoff distance does pretty much the opposite. So it, from the other side of your fog, so if it cuts off pretty close, I have fog around me, but not so much off in the distance. So you can see it kind of dissipates away from you. This is if you want fog just around you, but over there it's clear. I don't really know when that would be applicable. But if there's a reason you want it, that's how you get it. As far as the scattering color, you can affect how light the fog is. Any colors you want applied to it. This is where I would suggest going into like color theory and figuring out, depending on the kind of setting you're trying to establish. So if you want something spooky, but you know it's kind of dangerous, then you might have like a kind of a reddish hint to it. Not overly done, not like that or anything, but something to where it's like, let me just cancel that real quick. So something along the lines of just enough to kind of convey that like something might be happening. What's around the corner? Oh no! Oh, that kind of thing. So I'm just bump that down. Now the in-scattering texture, I haven't messed with this much, but I think this is for like if you want a wavy cloud effect. I will dive into this and then let y'all know. As I learn more, I will update y'all. With game development, it's kind of a, well, one of my professors put it a good way. It was like a learn, practice, learn, practice, learn, practice. Because the technology adapts and upgrades all the time. So getting into that mindset of learn the new thing, practice it, then learn the new thing, then practice it. So I will learn this and then we'll practice it together. This is how you can turn it into volumetric fog. So that is about the light, like I was talking about with that light shaft bloom stuff. Let me go over here and turn that on real quick. That might have to be when we get into more level design stuff, because it doesn't seem to work very much right off jump, but maybe it has to do with how thick the fog is. Whoa, what happened? Alright, let me just try and make this work real quick. Yeah, we'll get into the volumetric when we do an exterior scene and we got trees and stuff. You'll see there how it works. But yeah, so as for So we'll cover that one later on. So as for exterior lighting, that pretty much sets it up. So now what we can do is we can grab this floor, and if I hold Alt on the keyboard and drag up, then we now have an interior. So I'm going to build my lighting real quick just to see if it affects. Let's just get rid of both of those. And now it is completely pitch black in here. If you want to see what you've got, so up here where it says lit, you can click that and it'll take you to your view modes. We can go into unlit mode, that way we can see. I'm going to get rid of that also. And if we go into our lights tab, we can kind of position ourselves wherever we want to be. So our character starts over in this corner. I'm going to start over here. And I'm going to go back into lit mode, and I'm just going to drag out a point light. Now, these are a pretty common light, so you'll use these for what people refer to as working lights. You can use them for scene setting, but what I've seen is a lot of people will just drag out a bunch like this. I'm using that Alt drag method to just kind of place a bunch of them. If you get that red X, don't worry about it. These are just what's called working lights. So we'll kind of get in the vein of what we're going with for a scene. Now, this is way too many. You would never do this. But I'll just give it an example of what some people do for working lights. That many you wouldn't really use. You'd probably have like, you don't need that one or that one or that one really. So once these kind of stack up, it gets more effective. They kind of group together. There is a way to fix this red X. You just change it to movable and it gets rid of that. But movable are the most expensive kind of lights. Static used to be the way you would fix that. But with 5, I don't know if it's because of lumen, but if I change these to static and then I build my lighting, it didn't break? Alright, well, just to let you know, if you do change these to static, and then let's just build everything. I don't know what HLODs are, I'm going to look into that, but I usually just delete them and then let it rebuild, just to let you know. Okay. Well, maybe they fixed that. Or maybe it just is broken on my big computer and not my laptop. I don't know. But used to be, whenever I would set these to static and then try to build, they would just disappear. It'd be like there was no light there. So if you have that issue, try changing it back to stationary or static. Static lights are the best lights. They are very performant. You can have as many of these as you want, and you'll never get that red X. So they are the most preferred method. Stationary is stationary light will only have its shadowing and bounce lighting from static geometry baked by light mass. All other lighting will be dynamic. It can change color and intensity in game. The static lighting, though, is fully baked. So if you wanted a light that was going to be like flickering, so let's just set something up real quick. So if you wanted a light that was flickering, well, I'm jumping ahead. We're going to do the flickering at the end. But what you may also notice is that it's kind of dark. You know, you would want more light than this for a point light. There are some settings in here that you can fix. Let's get rid of that, and then under the exposure tab, we don't really want that auto adjustment, but if you have an interior scene and you don't want lights just everywhere, but you want a little bit more visibility, sorry, my throat does weird stuff, you can bump this up, this exposure setting, and it will automatically, without adding any more lights, you can add visibility. So before, after, kind of bump it up a little bit. But that is just the point lights. These are more like light bulbs. That's why they're shaped like light bulbs, etc., etc. But let's say you have like those fluorescent lighting in the ceiling. They also have this rectangle light, or rect light. I think rect is supposed to be rectangle. Pretty sure. Because for its settings, over here, which a lot of the settings are the same. I'm going to go over the differences first before we go back and talk about the intensity, light, color, etc. But for this one, you can affect the source width. Oh, and the height. I meant to go for the other one. Bumping up the intensity, you'll see now we got kind of a big rectangle light. Now this barn door setting is, if you look how it's got this outer rectangle, it when it's close to a wall, you can affect how high it goes up on that wall, just like that. And this is how far away from the source that basically the shadow fall off of that angle. So you could use, let's say you wanted this area to be lit up like an office or something. So we'll set this up pretty like that. And the light source will come from basically the middle. The size of it, you see how there's no light over here? It's because this is essentially the light bulb. But you can affect how far it reaches with the attenuation radius. So if I bump that up, now we're getting all the way down over to here. The attenuation is basically how far the light reaches. But this will also impact performance, because the further the light reaches, the more calculations that have to be made for shadows, bounces, etc., etc. So you want to try to rein it in as much as you can, but if it's static, you can kind of get away with a little bit more. So I'm going to make it static. I'm going to set its attenuation radius to about 1500, and I'm going to set its intensity to 50. And then I'm just going to Alt and drag and kind of duplicate this. I might move it up a little bit. Oh, that's the ceiling. Never mind. So I'll move this way a little bit, and then one more. So now we kind of have our room lit. But let's say I want to create a point of interest on this wall. You can take your point light and set this to something kind of low. I'm going to set it to static, turn down its attenuation radius. So let's say there's like a door right here, right? And you want the player to see it. A good way of directing your player's attention is through light. So our eyes are naturally drawn to light, and you can especially use lights of different colors to convey different things. So this will kind of signify this is an unlocked door, or like a locked door, or caution lights, or there's a lot of things you can do with color and light in order to communicate with your player without directly communicating. Now this source radius on this one will, let's see, there's one. So you see the shadow on the back right there? See how it's kind of harsh? Especially if I have that source radius at 0 as the default. If I bump this up, see how that shadow softens? This is how this controls how essentially big the lighting is, or how big the light itself is. Basically, the higher the source radius, the bigger the bulb you're using. So if it's like this, it's a very small bulb that's going to give you a very direct, concentrated source of light that's going to give you these harsh shadows. Whereas if you have a bigger source radius, it kind of softens those shadows a bit. So it's just something that you can play with in order to get the look you're going for. And you'll see it reflected by that yellow sphere. So let's say this is an unlocked, or a locked door for now, so we'll just say right there's that. You can do it that way, or you wanted to draw their attention over somewhere down a long dark hallway, you can do the same thing with another light. The way I got that light without dragging it out is if you hold L on the keyboard and left click, you can just get a point light directly. Now let's say that's good for things like this, but let's say you want to just kind of put their focus on something with a little bit more. How high is this? Let me bring this up a little bit, and then let me give us a bigger room to play in. Now taking them up this high, I will have to adjust their attenuation radius probably, but yeah. You can also affect the intensity. So if I take this up to 100, you see the light gets a little bit brighter, but I am going to also turn this up to 2500. So now our room is a little bit more visible. So another way of kind of directing your player's attention is with the spotlights. So this is just like when characters are on stage and you want the audience to know who's coming out. You shine that light on them. Let me just bump this up so I can really sell you what I'm telling you. So this will really put an emphasis on what you're showcasing. It's like showcase lights. Like I'll use these in instances like if we have a really long dark hallway, but there's a body at the end of it. So let me just, as an example, just pull this over like this, and I'll bump this down, and I'll get rid of that stuff real quick. So we have our locked door right here, and then I can put like a spotlight This is a good way of kind of setting like an atmosphere of, like, let's say your player is coming from this direction to get to that door, but you have something down here, like a big open grate with steam coming out of it, and there's like a body next to it, and you want to really sell that fear. You can highlight what you want the player to notice with lights, especially if you add a little bit of like a kind of orangish yellow or something. So there's a body, and then I have to run this way. Where's my player start? Let me see if I can grab that in the wall. So as they're running, they'll see it over there and they'll see the door. It's a good way of really drawing your player's attention. Let's say you want just a little bit more visibility. That's where you can go back to that post-processing volume, and you can either bump this up a little bit or down depending on your needs, and then just brighten the lights. Ooh, that's too much. Let's see, 15. 5, all right. Maybe now that we got some, maybe we can, let's see if making it volumetric does anything. Now, where's the volumetric? We'll do that in the environment. That works better for environments anyway. But yeah, that's what spotlights are usually good for, is stuff like that. So they walk in and there's a giant statue or something with a plaque that you want them to see. You can have some lights like this kind of pointed. Oh, the intercone angle just does exactly what it says. It's the direct where the light is actually pointing. and then the outer cone angle is the fall off of that light. So it's kind of like the source radius, where it will affect the sharpness of shadows and such coming off of it. So the closer those are, the sharper the shadow. This will give it a little bit more fall off. You can also add in a source radius to this, which will do just like in the other one. So you'll see down here where it's affecting the sharpness of that shadow. Same thing. Also to keep in mind that also will, just like the other ones, affect attenuation radius. It'll impact performance a little bit. So you want to make sure that you don't go too crazy with lights. A good way of finding out how you're doing on your lighting is under your lit modes. They have optimization view modes. So one of the optimization view modes, right here you can see you have your lighting. So it'll kind of, I got that lit up. And then over here you can see what's kind of dark, what's kind of lit up and all that. But if you go into your optimization, we can see our light complexity. So this bar down here tells you pretty much what you need to know. Anything over in this area is pretty bad. Anything over here is pretty good. Right now you can see that one right there. It's pretty complex. If I turn down the attenuation radius, and the intensity doesn't affect it too much unless it's 0, and then there's no light. But it's the attenuation radius that will really have an impact, and your source radius. Now your source radius doesn't have too much of an impact. So let's try, if I take this back to lit mode and bump this up. Well, there's so much that you can do. But just kind of play around with that and get your, so we go in lit mode, and then you can check your light map density. There's a bunch of things you can find out from these optimizations. Basically, you want to try to keep everything as green or around here as you can. Right around here as you can. But you'll dabble with it, you'll figure it out. I'm just going to show you how to use them. And then when we set up our actual scenes, I'll go more in depth on how to optimize. So yeah, that's pretty much the ins and outs of lighting. Post-processing really comes in handy for optimization, because you can, like I said, like I got 4 lights in here now, and if I just bump up this exposure, you can see it's much more lit up without having to go too complex on your lighting. So it's still a little bit complex because I had to bump up the attenuation radius. I wouldn't really put them up that high. Then again, the ceiling wouldn't usually be that high in this kind of room. But yeah, we can really tone down our complexity by using post-processing. There are some other settings too that we'll get into later on, like image effects. Those are good. But the color grading, where you can affect the brightness of shadows and stuff, we'll get into that when we get into that. But for now, we can actually set up that flickering light just to have a little bit of fun towards the end. So I'm going to reset this back. So this is going to be a blueprint component, or blueprint, not component, but a blueprint actor. So I'm going to put this in the blueprints folder. I'm going to right click. So again, it's very important that you are mindful of where you store things. So nesting folders is a very good thing. That way you can have specific, okay, this is environmental things, this is lighting, this is blah blah blah. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create a lighting folder, because we'll probably end up creating some more lights when we get into the next interior level stuff and how to make sure everything is in scale to the player. So I'm going to double click and open that up, and then you can have multiple folders. So if you got flickering lights, spotlights, etc., etc., I'm just going to put them all in this lighting folder for now, because it's not going to be too in-depth. You'll scale your folders and everything to fit your project sizes. So I'm going to create a blueprint class. So you just right click right here in the content browser, or up here you can create a I think it's right here somewhere, isn't it? All classes. We'll right click, create a basic asset, and then blueprint class. We want to create an actor, and an actor is just an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. Basically, everything in the game exists as an actor or a pawn or a character, etc. Most of it is actors. So we're going to create an actor. This will be our BP underscore flickering light. And I'm going to double click and open that up. And then you'll be greeted with this page. So I'm going to, over in the top left, you will see the Components tab. We will add a new component, and we want to add a point light. Or you can use any light that you wanted. Like if you decided you want to do a spotlight with it, you can do the spotlight, rec light, what have you. I'm just going to use a point light, for our example. Now over in our event graph, so the viewport is where you will see everything about the actor you're creating, and the event graph is where you can give it its brain, essentially. So we're going to go to the event graph, and on begin play, we want it to run an event. For the event we want it to run, let's just right click and we will create a custom event. So right clicking will give you access to a bunch of actions that you can take in a blueprint. With this context sensitive thing ticked, you will see everything that this type of actor could be able to do. For right now, we are just going to create our own custom event. So I'm just going to type custom and click that. And this will be called Flicker. Now you can rename events once you create them by either highlighting them and hitting F2 on the keyboard, or you can do it from up here, right there. So when we flicker, I want to essentially tell the light to turn off. Then it's going to do a short delay and then turn itself right back on. So from our point light, from our Components tab, if you grab anything and drag it out, you can get a reference to it. This is basically saying, I'm going to be altering the state of this object. Let me get it so I can tell it what I want it to do. Now from our point light, off our blue return node, we are going to tell it to toggle visibility. Sometimes it'll create a second one. Just delete that one. I think that other one probably doesn't have it. Toggle visibility. So sometimes it pops up with one, sometimes it doesn't. But we are going to take our custom event node. This is an execution pin, and blueprints run from left to right. So this will cause this to go. And then this will cause the next thing in line, so on and so forth. It always runs left to right. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take the point light and tell it to turn its visibility to the opposite of whatever it currently is. So if it's visible, now it is hidden. If it is hidden, now it is visible, so on and so forth. After we toggle the visibility, we want to do a short delay. A delay just makes it wait a set amount of time until it cycles back through and does its own thing again. Now because we want it to do the exact same thing it just did, we can, at the end, just call our flicker event. And this is a direct reference to this. So it will, once we call this, it will toggle the visibility, wait a certain amount of time, and then call itself again so that it'll cycle back through. When you are calling events inside of their own events, you have to have a delay. Because if I tried to feed this in just like that, and then hit play, oh, I don't have one in the world. And then hit play. When I exit, oh, let me actually call it, and then you'll see if I can spell. So if I call this, and then it's just perpetually running, you'll get an infinite loop detected, because basically it's saying, I'm calling, I'm calling, I'm calling, I'm calling, I'm calling, you never pick up. That kind of thing. So we want a short delay, just to give the memory a little bit of a break. So it's like, I'm calling, I wait, I'm calling, I wait. I have to see if they answer first. So now if I jump in, you can see it's kind of flickering. But that is not that great. It's too uniform, really, to be a flicker. So what we can do is we can drag off of this duration. So what you see right here is an input. And what you can do is you can do mathematics or all kinds of stuff in order to establish what you want the duration to be. For this one's just going to be a very simple. We're going to drag off of here, and we are going to type random float in range. So you'll see random float from stream, random float in range. The reason I use in range is because we can establish a minimum time amount and a maximum time amount. So I'm going to set this, let's say, 0.025, and then a max of 0.1. Did it go? Oh yeah, it did. So now every time it calls this delay, it will get a random length of time from this range. So now when we jump in, you'll see it. Let me just set it to something like, to really give an example of what it's doing. So yeah, it's kind of got sporadic lengths of time. Now, just as a quick, because that's great, right? You could use a bunch of these throughout your level, but let's say you want one that has a faster flicker rate, and I'm going to show you. It might be a little bit more advanced, but I think y'all can handle it. So if we promote these to variables, it basically will let us adjust those numbers. So if I right click on the minimum right here, I can click promote to variable, and this will be renamed flicker min for the minimum. And then on the max, we can hit flicker max. And then this essentially becomes a referenceable component almost, just like the point light, but it's a variable. So you'll see doing it that way, promoting it from here, automatically establishes that the minimum is 0.1 and the maximum is 1. But what you can do is you can click these little eyeballs right here, or with it selected, you can go over here to instance editable, and you'll see that little eyeball clicks open. Now, when we come out here and we have that light selected, I have access to those variables. So I can have, let's say I got one that's 0.5 and 2, and let's put this one far away just in case anyone has like epilepsy, might give it a little bit. But I'll set this to like 0.1 and 0.75. Hopefully that's not too much, but you can see that one will flicker a lot more often than this one over here will. So hopefully that's not too confusing. I know I'm trying to aim this at beginners, but I also want to show you cool stuff as we go along to make it more interesting and show you how you would do things later on, and including how to make parameters that are affectable. So yeah, that's how you would do a simple little flicker light. I am going to leave this on screen for just a hot second in case anyone needs to pause it and take a look at it. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I want to go more in depth and show y'all a bunch of really cool stuff, but if I'm meandering too much or if I get sidetracked, just let me know. I want this to be as beneficial for y'all as I can make it. But I do know that I am a little bit on the scatterbrain side. But you help me get better at explaining stuff, and I will help you with whatever I can do. So hope y'all enjoyed it. And if y'all are interested, I am on Fiverr, and I will help you learn for an hour at a time. You know, one-on-one lesson thing. So yeah, Thanks for stopping by and checking it out. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.